What's going on, guys? This is the Edge DFS. This is the showdown, Texans versus Lions on Thanksgiving. My name is Tyson Smith. I'm joined by Ellie Hernandez. What's going on, bro? How are you, man? This is our second show of the day, man. What's going on?
Not too much, man. Just excited for a full day of football where the games will be staggered so we can watch them all.
So this is the first game of the day. Am I right about that? Let's confirm. This is 9:30 a.m. Pacific, so 12:30, yep. And this is going to be on CBS. So wake up early, start drinking on Thanksgiving. You know, why not? This is an interesting game here. This is going to be a whole lot of offense and not a single ounce of defense here, in my opinion. So, what are your thoughts on this game overall as we switch over to the Vegas side of things here?
I think it's going to be a fun game. I appreciate the fact that they kind of got this game at a pick'em. I'm not sure I feel the same way. I think this is definitely a spot where Houston can come in and get the win. And I guess if you give kind of the underdog or the home team edge to Detroit,
yeah.
That, if the roles was reversed here, I'd expect closer to a 6.5 point spread. So I guess this isn't too far off, but just based on what I'm seeing here is it definitely looks like it's going to be fairly balanced exposure across the board. So we're going to see a lot more 3-3s than we would normally see, I think, here.
Mm-hmm.
But both defenses suck. So this is going to be a fun game to watch, I think, from an offensive standpoint.
Yeah, this could be an opportunity for Matt Stafford to actually have a good game for once. We all know about Deshaun Watson. We know how dangerous he can be. The question is he surrounded by the players that can actually help him win games? Right now, that's a no. He's 3-7. Detroit's 4-6, which is surprising. I didn't even realize they had that good of a record. I thought they were much worse than their record is. So Houston is -150. With a 60% win probability. It's a 51 total, and Houston is favored by 3 on the road, which is pretty interesting. We've got your typical Detroit Thanksgiving Day game. Every year this goes down. These guys are aware of playing on Thanksgiving. They're used to it. Houston, not so much. I think they've gotten. I remember maybe 1 or 2 Deshaun Watson slates on Thanksgiving. I could be wrong about that, just off the top of my head. But Detroit has experience on this day. Matt Stafford. I'm actually interested in how Matt Stafford has been doing on Thanksgiving. If there's any weird stats that come up, if you find anything throughout the show, Ellie, throw that at us. But typically speaking, I feel like Matt Stafford does pretty decent on Thanksgiving, and there's some relatively decent games from the Lions, even though they mostly are under 500 when these games happen. So anything to point out here? What do you think about this total at 51? I mean, obviously the last game we talked about, we did a show earlier this morning for Ravens and Steelers. If you want to check that one out, we have a full hour plus long episode really diving into it. We also have a quick slant episode that's 15 minutes or less. But that particular game is a 45 total, which is kind of interesting. This one being 51 doesn't necessarily surprise me. You have 2 of the worst offenses in the NFL. What are your thoughts on this game and the total overall? And do you think the spread is correct?
I don't know. After seeing what happened in Detroit on Sunday, I really, it's hard to call some of these spreads now. This team is pretty bad, and they're really bad against the run. So I don't know. I think it's going to be difficult for Detroit to stay in the game. So I think we could be closer to a full touchdown when it's all said and done. But yeah, man, I that total seems about in line. I would maybe bump it up to 53, 54.5. That might be kind of a little bit more reasonable. But again, we're going to find out which is worse, these 2 defenses or these 2 offenses. So it could go either way just because of the unknowns with both sides.
So let's get into the injuries here. There's some reasonable injuries to talk about here. On the Texans, well, I have this graphic all backwards, so forgive me on this. So obviously the Lions are on the left and the Texans are on the right. Oops. So for the Lions, we've got Kenny Golladay. He's questionable with a hip. He's been out for a minute now, which is a big deal. If Golladay comes back, He's their number one guy. With Galladay in, Marvin Jones typically has better fantasy outputs. Marvin Jones Jr. doesn't usually get it done if he's by himself. You've also got DeAndre Swift, which is a huge deal. He's really come into his own. He was named the starter last week, or maybe it was the week before. I think it was week 10. Fantasy-wise, he's been doing pretty good. He's the number one guy. The issue with him previously was he was splitting with Carry-On and with Adrian Peterson. Now he's the number one guy. So he's questionable with a head injury. Danny Amendola is also a pretty big piece of this puzzle. He can get you 6-7 catches in a game, and at a middle of the road price, he's a good option as well. He's questionable with a hip. When you move over to the Texans side of things, we all know about David Johnson. He's on the IR. He could come back this year. We'll see. So you have Duke Johnson playing for him. You got Randall Cobb, who's doubtful with a toe. I think that could also be some big news. And you have Kenny Stills, who's questionable. So it looks like Randall Cobb is going to be out for this. Kenny Stills could get a little extra playing time. Anything jump out to you here from on both sides here? Like what sticks out as big news that you're going to need to really pay attention to?
I think Kenny Galladay is obviously important. He's going to open up some value at the wide receiver position if he doesn't play.
Yeah.
But it makes Marvin Jones' 7,400 price tag a lot better too. I don't know if honestly, I don't know how much I'm going to be able to get of both of those guys, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But Marvin Jones is impacted severely by Kenny Galladay being on the field.
Yeah.
Granted, he has had a couple decent. He's been trending upwards. I just don't know if it's the same without Galladay.
Yeah.
But other than that, the real important thing is going to be DeAndre Swift. If he's active or inactive, that's going to determine a lot of where this slate goes. These are two very, very bad running defenses. So, I'm going to be paying very close attention to the side of the ball.
All right, let's just get right into it here. Let's not even waste any time. Let's go ahead and get into the breakdown. Break it down! All right, so we're starting with the quarterbacks here. It's pretty interesting how DraftKings is pricing some of these slates. So you had Lamar Jackson at like 11.2, I think he was. You got Deshaun Watson at 13,000 right now, 13.2K. That's Deshaun, or that's Lamar Jackson a couple weeks ago when he was at his height of his pricing. That's Cam Newton on a showdown slate. Those are really expensive players. He deserves that, but I'm curious. 13.2. How do we construct a roster with him at 13,200? And I don't think we can put him in the captain. I mean, that's just. If you've watched the show before, we're not sticking 30% owned dudes in the captain, especially at 13K.
Yeah, I love Deshaun Watson on this slate. I think he's going to get 8-9 carries. He has rushing upside. Obviously, he has rushing touchdown upside. And just Detroit, they're bad. They're bad at stopping the run. So I think he becomes a much more valuable play given the fact that Detroit's so bad at stopping the rushing attack. I agree. I don't know if he's going to be a viable captain at 13.2, but he'll for sure be in just about every one of my lineups at the flex spot.
Yeah,
I think he's in a great smash spot. And look, this offense lives and dies by Deshaun Watson. If they win this game, or if they're even competitive, if they put up points on the board, it's going to be because he willed this team to get there. He was winning playoff games in spite of Bill O'Brien. And it felt like Bill O'Brien was intentionally trying to sabotage the team at times. And Deshaun Watson is enough of a stud to go out there and win games. So I have no issue putting him in every lineup. And I really am not worried about his price tag, because if we are going to compare him to Lamar Jackson, like the one thing that I need to point out is, yeah, Lamar is a better overall runner, but Deshaun Watson is just a better pure passer. He is a very, very good throwing quarterback, and I think he's going to take advantage of some of these these deep balls that he's going to have the option to throw with Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks. So I love him. I don't think he's a viable captain, but he'll be one of my most exposed players.
Yeah, I think, if he's in every lineup, I'll be totally fine with that. I don't think you can avoid him on this slate. When I say, he's not a good captain choice, and you said it as well, it's just because of the ownership. And if you're playing cash, if you're playing single entry, go for it. Get different in the flex. When it comes to putting Deshaun Watson at probably 30% owned in the captain, I don't know how I would ever get different on a slate like this unless you're playing, what's that guy's name? Cephas Quintana or something, some random players that you've almost never heard of. That's the only way to handle this. The interesting thing here is Matt Stafford is at 10.8K. I'm not really sure I agree with this. 10.8K is a lot for a quarterback. I know, look, Matt Stafford has high upside. He's just very inconsistent. And this is a good matchup for him. So there's probably a reason why they priced him up. He's not projecting great, in my opinion. At 10.8K, I think, we've learned our lesson with Showdown Slate. Sometimes you can get away with fading a quarterback. In this case, Matt Stafford might be the way to go. I don't know how to handle this. This is going to be one of these things where we got to wait for injury and ownership news. Me personally, I would rather get like 2 high-end wide receivers on the Lions instead of going with Stafford. I don't know. What are your thoughts on Stafford here?
I like him. I think he's very much in play. He's had an up and down season, but he does have the potential to put up an 18 to 22 point performance. And it looks like it's almost like every other week he has like 9 points and then 20 points or 7 and then 12. So I think he's in play. I'm not going to be as exposed to him as I will for Deshaun Watson. But again, keep in mind that this is also another team that unless the emergence of DeAndre Swift kind of changes the way this offense plays, it once again lives and dies on Matthew Stafford. And, he can make games competitive even when they shouldn't be. But I'll probably be with the field or slightly underexposed when it comes to him. Just given the pricing on this particular guy, I think there's going to be some more players that I'd like to capture just all around wide receiver and tight end.
Yeah, and he's going to be high owned. I feel like obviously Deshaun Watson, I think he's going to be 85% plus in the flat or just overall. But Matt Stafford, I think, can come in around 60 potentially. Do you think that's too high of a number of a prediction on that?
No, I would expect it to be 55, 60%. The only thing that's going to impact the slate really is the pricing on Deshaun Watson. And it really feels like there's going to be some additional value that opens up, so that people are going to start jamming in those additional or both quarterbacks. It's really just common for a showdown slate for people to be playing both quarterbacks. So I think 55 to 60 is a good floor or just kind of medium projection for the ownership.
Yeah. For some reason, Fantasy Cruncher has him listed as questionable that he missed practice.
We talking about practice.
So I don't know what the deal is with that. I didn't find that in my research. Something to keep an eye on. He's going to play. I mean, we haven't heard any news about him, Matt Stafford not playing on Thanksgiving. So keep an eye on that. But I'm considering, I'm not worried about that at all. So let's move over to the running backs here. Who do you want to start with? You want to go?
Let's start with Houston.
Let's go Houston. So this is kind of an interesting situation here. We've got Duke Johnson. He's at 7,800. No, not David Johnson. It's a different D Johnson. If you guys, any casual guys jumping on the DraftKings slate, yes, there is a difference between these two players. Duke Johnson obviously isn't nearly as talented as David Johnson. Look, we're Cardinals fans. We know what David Johnson's capable of. We know he has pretty good upside. He's probably not. It probably doesn't help that he's on this bad team. But when it comes to Duke Johnson replacing him, I don't think he's not a multifaceted player. Duke Johnson to me is your third down guy that comes in and can get you, a couple draw plays, a couple receptions. I don't see him as a starting running back in the NFL. No offense to him. He's priced up to 7,800. I think that's a little extreme. It's not terrible. If he was above 8, I would just X him out. I think you're gonna have to sprinkle him in. You know, Detroit is ranked 29th against the rush, so there's no way you can avoid him. But if you look at CJ Prosise, former Seahawks player, he's at 1,200. We'd have to dig into the snap rate here. While you're talking about this, I'll look into that. What are your thoughts on both these players? Are you going to stick with the receivers on Houston, or are you going to sprinkle in some of these guys?
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to get much of this side of the ball. I don't think I'm going to get much of the running backs for Houston. Just not a fan of it. I think Deshaun Watson gets the biggest boost. David Johnson being out, I think he's going to get. He has the potential to have a few more carries. Duke Johnson just hasn't impressed this season. I understand that he's in a very good spot, but he was also in a good spot against the Cleveland Browns and wasn't able to do anything. I know this isn't the same thing. There is a chance that he has the ability to do okay, but at 7,800, I'm just not sure it's worth the risk. But it is funny that you brought up CJ Prosise, because there is there's a decent chance that he's going to get some run. When you get those numbers, let me know. But 1,200 on a slate where there hasn't been clear value really identified yet, from what I can tell, I think is something to pay attention to. I don't mind, getting a little CJ Prosise, Deshaun Watson, and then maybe one or two of the wide receivers. I think that'll give you a little bit of a unique build, and still give you flexibility to kind of grab some of those other pieces.
So it looks like CJ Prosise got some run last week. Week 11, they beat the Patriots. Looks like he got 3 rushes for 4 yards, 2 targets, 2 receptions. Really nothing to write home about. At that price tag, you're going to need a lot more volume out of him. You're going to need like 10 carries, 8 carries, and potentially like 6, 7 targets. I would consider him a low, maybe a 1 lineup sort of guy, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just not worth it. I don't even consider Duke Johnson a good play. If Duke Johnson was 5,000, I would consider playing Duke Johnson, obviously. But I just don't see him as I don't see either of these guys as an elite play, even though Detroit's rush defense is not very good. Let's look at Duke Johnson, some of his previous outputs here. I'd say, this season, his ceiling when it comes to attempts is 16. He had that against Jacksonville. You're talking like, 50 yards rushing ceiling this season, and he's only got 1 touchdown. I just don't see it, man. Like, we've already put it in our fades of the night, but this is going to be one of them for me. This is not on the slide, but I would highly consider this to be one of my fades of the night. Now, look, if he comes in at like 20% owned, okay, then I feel free to just unleash him. But because he's the starting running back on a team that's favored, and he's got that, he's D Johnson. I'm being serious about this. D Johnson. People see that they're on the Draftkings app scrolling through. They might just put him in. Like, he might be overinflated. I know it sounds crazy, but this is Thanksgiving. There's going to be a lot of casual players playing. So one thing to think about is, David Johnson at 7,800. Oh shit, I remember him, and they put him in. So just look at the ownership. If he's under, I actually like him if he's super low owned, because there's really no risk there. But when he's high owned, I think you can get some huge leverage, and I just don't like him there. So let's move over to Detroit. So this is interesting. Obviously, we know about DeAndre Swift. He's at 8,400. He's the number 1 guy. If he starts, I anticipate him to get 65, 60+% of the carries. You got Adrian Peterson at 5,000 and Kerryon Johnson at 4,800. It's so interesting. Kerryon Johnson, before he got injured, I think it was 2 years ago, or maybe it was last year. I don't remember. But he was the guy. Kerryon was the guy. He was crushing it. I don't know if they've given up on him. I don't know if they just like DeAndre Swift more. I'm not really sure what's going on there. I don't think that Matt Patricia knows what the hell is going on either. He's just sort of along for the ride. But look, Detroit against Houston, they're the last ranked rush defense in the NFL. Any one of these guys can go off. Adrian Peterson can have, fucking 3 touchdowns in this game. It's going to be difficult to figure out where to go because both defenses are so bad. If DeAndre Swift plays, which I think he's leaning towards playing. I haven't really heard any huge news about him not being able to play. If he does play, are you going to get a ton of him? And can you get a ton of him at this price tag, potentially being dinged up? I mean, there's always a case where he comes in, he tries it out, and in the second quarter, he's done for the day. And that's what really scares me about playing a guy like this.
Yeah, I think honestly at his price tag, I think you can get a decent amount of exposure to him and not have to risk everything to do it. I think he's just above kind of where most people would anticipate him to be. I think he would have been closer to 7,900 would have been a more reasonable tag, I think, given the injury situation. So I think it's very possible that he doesn't come up as chalky as what we're expecting.
And I don't mean to interrupt you, but he was actually concussion protocol. So if he's cleared, he'll be okay. Like I take back what I said. If he's cleared,
Okay.
he should be a great play because of concussion protocol. It's not like you can re-injure yourself concussion-wise. It's not like a hamstring or a toe injury. You know what I mean?
Unless you're Jordan Reed. But
Yeah,
look, I'm just going to keep it simple for DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift's one of my favorite plays on the slate. This running defense sucks. And I look, man, Matt Stafford and this wide receiver core, they're unknown right now, and I don't understand why they're struggling. But I do know DeAndre Swift is making a change on this team. Adrian Peterson's old and slow. Don't really have interest in him at 5K. If DeAndre Swift's out, maybe. But again, I don't think I'll get there. And then Kerryon Johnson, again, I don't want anything to do with these guys. So DeAndre Swift's my guy from his backfield. Otherwise, I'm probably fading.
yeah, I feel you, man. I feel you. It's gonna be tough. I mean, Kerryon Johnson. Let's just look at what he can offer here. So week 11, a 5 point. I mean, he's getting max under 10. He's like 9.5 a couple times this season. And at 4,800, that's just not going to work. He needs to be in the 2,200, 2,500 range for you to even think about playing him. Is there a situation where Swift doesn't play? Yeah. And if Swift doesn't play, then I love Kerryon Johnson. So just something to keep an eye on. If Swift plays 8,400, I think he's a great option. I think he'll probably come in around 40% owned, in my opinion. And if that's the case, you just got to play him. Anything else to add here on these the running backs, or should we just move on?
Yeah, I'm fine with moving on. There's not much for these guys.
All right, so I think the consensus here is running backs not the sexiest option here for this particular game, in my opinion. I think both of these quarterbacks can sling the ball. They're going to throw it a shitload. Both defenses can't cover. When you're looking at wide receivers for Detroit, you got Kenny Golladay at 9,000 straight up. Marvin Jones is 7,400. You got Marvin Hall 4,600, and you've got Danny Amendola at 2,200. So if Kenny Golladay goes, I think he's a great option. I just don't know with his injury. What did I say? It was a hip. Let's see. Yeah, it's a hip injury. So look, if he comes in and he sucks it up and plays at 80%, I think you can still play him. But to me, I hope Kenny Golladay plays because that opens it up for Marvin Jones. Typically speaking, you would think the other way. Oh well, if Kenny Golladay doesn't play, Marvin Jones is a great play, and yes, he still is a pretty good play. I just like Marvin Jones when Kenny Golladay is in the game. It's taking away that pressure on Marvin. It's taking away whatever coverage they're throwing the main wide receiver, and Marvin Jones thrives in that situation. And I think in this case, if Kenny Golladay is in, Marvin Jones is an even better play. When it comes to Danny Amendola, I think if he plays, he's a good option too at 2,200. And Marvin Hall, let's look at Marvin Hall. He's at 4,600. Nothing really to write home about. He did have a 113-yard game. He has 2 touchdowns this season. So, decent option. Decent option here. I think all 4 of these guys you can scatter around. I'd rather get these guys than the running backs on both sides of the ball. What are your thoughts? How are you handling the Golladay situation if he plays? Like, what are your thoughts here?
I think assuming Galladay's in, Golladay and Jones are both in pretty decent positions given their potential cornerback matchups, and look, I mean, Houston's defense just really isn't all that great. So honestly, I don't think either is a bad play. I think both are 100% in play. Kenny Golladay has the ability to, I mean, what do they call him? Minitron. I mean, he has the ability to be physical and bring down these ridiculous catches.
Yeah.
And when Marvin Jones and Matt Stafford are all in a rhythm, I mean, you're looking at they can eat up all the targets. You'll have 12 to 13 apiece, and then each guy can have 10 receptions. And it's not uncommon for them to just all be positively correlated. So that's something to keep in mind when building if you're going to have a Matt Stafford stack. And I mean, don't hesitate to throw both these guys in there.
Oh, yeah.
Now, with Kenny Golladay, I don't know about his price tag, given the fact that he's coming back from injury. But I mean, he's still one of the better players, positional players that'll be on the field. So I'm going to have a decent amount of exposure to him. Marvin Jones, again, he's been on an upward trajectory. I mean, if we just look at the past couple of weeks, he's doing a lot better. I mean, what did he have last week? He's got 2 touchdowns and 10 targets. I mean, and of course,
he's got
1 touchdown.
Yeah, so he has 5 touchdowns this year. Not bad. He hasn't gone over 100 yards yet. He did have against Washington, he did have a 96-yard game with 8 receptions. So, look, it could be also just he's game scripted out, or look, this isn't a good team. So we don't know if it's him, if it's protection on Stafford, if the coaching staff is not throwing plays his way. We just don't know. All I know is that in the past, Marvin Jones has such a high ceiling, and at that price tag, I just like him. I just really like him.
Yeah, I agree with you. And then, I mean, if we're looking at some of these other guys, I really don't have too much interest in Marvin Hall unless Kenny Golladay is out.
Yeah.
And then, sure, I'll take a couple flyers on it. Marvin Hall does have the upside to, break a 70-yard touchdown. But we talk about this. Every team essentially has one of those guys. But, I mean, you can't continually bank on that. So this team has a decent option again at Danny Amendola, because he may not have that upside, but he could end up with 25 receptions.
Yeah.
And I think that's viable, especially at 2.2, especially if Kenny Golladay is out. We can get a decent exposure to him, and I mean, that might be more cash viable, but even then, I don't think he's awful in tournaments, given the fact that he's 2,200 and can eat a lot of targets, which results in, I mean, decent output. I mean, has he really done anything this year, to be honest, though?
Amendola?
Yeah. I thought he had a game recently where he just had
he had a 10 target, 7 receptions, 77-yard game. He has no touchdowns this year. His best output was around 15 fantasy points. So look, the price tag, at 2,200, that actually represents that pretty well. If he can get you 11 fantasy points, that's a good. I'm not going to win you a tournament probably, but you're going to need a ceiling output from him. But he's getting volume. He's getting targets. He's getting a few receptions a game. He had that one big game against Minnesota in Week 9. So look, he's potentially trending up. He had. Week 7, 8, and 9, he had pretty decent games. He had pretty much over 50 yards receiving and between 3 to 7 receptions. So, look, he's an option. If he does play, he's a great option. If he doesn't play, it makes Marvin Hall an even more interesting option. But 4,600 for Marvin Hall is a little worrisome to me. I just don't love that price. All right. So, just to summarize the Lions wide receivers, I feel like Golladay and Jones are not negatively correlated in this game. It's kind of like a Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp situation. There's going to be volume for both of them, and both could end up in the optimal if they're in. I think there's no doubt that Stafford is going to target both guys. So don't be afraid to play them together. I know they're a little bit expensive, but I would even consider. I know this sounds crazy because you want to put Stafford in with multiple wide receivers or your quarterback with multiple wide receivers, but I just don't know if you have to in this case. Let's move over to Houston's wide receivers. So we've got Will Fuller at 11.2K. That's a lot for a wide receiver. I think he's a relatively dominant player most of the time. Sometimes he disappears, and look, let's just be honest, this guy's hurt more than he plays. So at 11.2K, I don't know how much I can get of him. And then you got Brandon Cooks back from the dead. He's at 9,800. Kiki Kute at 3,400. Kenny Stills at 1,000 straight up, which is interesting. And then you got Randall Cobb, who's doubtful at 1,400. I'm not even going to really talk about Randall Cobb. If a guy is doubtful on Monday or doubtful on Tuesday and you have a Thursday game, I just don't. I don't have high hopes for a player like that. So look, if he does play, 1,400 is a good option, but from here on, we're just not going to consider him even an option unless something changes. So Fuller, Cooks, Coutier, I don't know how the fuck you say that name, and Kenny Stills, 4 guys. Who's your favorite here at 11.2K? If you're playing Will Fuller, how the hell do you play anybody else?
Yeah, that's really kind of the quandary I find myself in because I love Will Fuller. He's getting the volume. I didn't think, by week 11 I'd be a Will Fuller fan, but I've always loved this guy. The biggest thing is whether or not he's been able to get through his season.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, he's maintained some decent health throughout the year, and he's not having a bad season at all. I mean, other than he has one game less than 10 fantasy points. Everything else is fairly decent. And, we've got a couple in the 20s here. So I think his price tag is justified, especially given the fact, again, that they're playing such a shitty defense. And I'm going to try and get as much exposure as I can to him. I think, finding guys like CJ ProSize, for example, if we think that there's a potential that he's going to get a usage bump, I think he gives you the flexibility that you need to get Deshaun Watson and Will Fuller. Otherwise, I think coming down to Kenny Stills is completely in play at 1K. If you need some value, he does have the ability to. He has some speed. He has the ability to catch a touchdown pass here and there. Again, I think the concern here is going to be volume and if he's going to get the opportunities to catch the ball.
Yeah.
So I think he's viable. But another interesting option is Kiki Kute or whatever his name is. He has the ability to come out of the slot and take the top off the defense.
Yeah.
For a while there, it was him and Will Fuller who were essentially playing the same position, but they got both they got both guys healthy. They even have a healthy Brandon Cooks, which is insane.
Yeah. I mean, so Coutier is a blast from the past, man, and same with Kenny Stills. I mean, I feel like Coutier last year, did okay, and in the previous years, he's gotten volume. He's been the number 2 guy when Fuller was out. He sort of stepped in. I don't know if it was a successful, really, if that's a guy that actually can fill the shoes of a guy like Will Fuller. But the point is Coutier is not just some random dude that hasn't gotten any snaps. He's played multiple seasons with this team. He's gotten some high upside games. I mean, 2018, he had a 31-point outburst. He had a 24-point outburst. He's got a good ceiling. It just depends on game script, and I think he's obviously been trending down lately this year. He hasn't really had the opportunity. But I think he had a touchdown. Yeah, he had a touchdown last week. So something to consider with a guy that's 3,400. If you're getting touchdowns every couple weeks at that price, definitely worth thinking about. Brandon Cooks at 9,800 is so interesting. Like, what do you think about him? I mean, look, you just can't get both Will Fuller and Cooks in a lineup, in my opinion, unless you really go heavy. You go heavy on the Texans and sort of fade Detroit altogether.
I think Brandon Cooks is in a good spot. I just don't know if I can pay for 9,800 for him. If I'm going to pay up, I'd prefer to go Will Fuller. He's been more consistent with the fantasy output.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I've seen Brandon Cooks take too many ridiculous hits and just get absolutely fucked up. And I that scares me, man. That's probably just my own personal bias that I should overcome.
Yeah.
But the expectation that he's going to hit a ceiling game at 9,800 just isn't there for me. Especially given the fact, again, this is a terrible run defense, and I expect Deshaun Watson to be running RPOs. He's going to be running the ball out of the shotgun or the and then he's going to try and look for probably Will Fuller on some slants if he needs to. And we'll get into tight end for a second too, but I think that's where a majority of the targets going to be allocated. I expect them to try and get Cooks involved, but again, I just think that they're going to try and establish the run game with Deshaun Watson as opposed to really airing it out to both these guys. So the trade-off for me is to really kind of just not have as much Brandon Cooks and get as much Fuller as I possibly can.
So let's move over to tight end for the Texans here. You've got Jordan Akins, who's really come into his own lately. He's always been a relative threat, in the red zone. He's good for a couple targets a game, maybe 40, 50 yards and a random touchdown. But last week, he was targeted quite a bit. He had 83 yards. He had 6 targets, 5 receptions. No touchdown for him, but look, this guy at 5,600, I feel like he's priced up. This is the highest price he's been all season, maybe in his whole career. Typically, he's under 4K or under 5K in the low 4s. This might be a trap. This might be a Draftkings trap here at 5,600. You're going to need a touchdown. You're going to need 60, 70 yards for him to pay off. I don't see that happening. I'm not opposed to getting Jordan Akins, but when it's recency bias. If it wasn't for that game last week, he would still be in 4,400, 4,200. So they boost him up $1,200 because he had one good game. He didn't even have a touchdown there. I'm just more likely to get under the field on Akins just because I think people are going to see his last game and say, ooh, he's cheap and I can throw him in. You got Darren Fells and you got Pharaoh Brown, who I don't know who that is. I've never heard of him, but he's $400, and you got Darren Fells at $2,600. How are you handling this? Are you likely to just stray away from the tight end position and go heavier on wide receiver? How are you handling this for Texans?
No, man. I think both guys are in play. Hopefully that price tag will kind of steer ownership away from Jordan Akins. But, I mean, you're looking at his performance. When we looked at it right now, a touchdown here or there kind of changes the output overall.
Yeah.
If he has a touchdown last week, I mean, that puts him at 19, 20 points. And you add a touchdown into pretty much any one of these weeks, and it's a completely different output. So I think Jordan Akins is definitely in play here. And I don't know, man. It's going to be a little bit more risky, but you're going to have that opportunity for upside. And then the guy underneath him, Darren Fells at 2,600. This is another one of those a little bit riskier plays, but he definitely has the upside and he has the potential to eat up some of that volume. I mean,
yeah.
Look, I fully anticipate the Houston Texans to come out in 2 tight end sets with Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks so that they can try and get Duke Johnson going at best they can, which means they're going to action hit the tight ends off the get-go. So there's a good chance that you might have a little bit of Darren Fells and Jordan Akins action going.
Yeah.
So you can jam in Fells at his 2,600 tag and be okay. I mean, he has 3 games over digit fantasy output.
Yeah, look.
Yeah,
exactly. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I know that's a little bit more on the ceiling side, but in one game he got 7 targets, 6 receptions. That's the game he put out 20.5.
Yeah.
But look, if you remove that outlying performance, he's still getting 13, 14 points or double-digit points on these games where he's only getting 2 receptions. So, yeah, he probably will get 2 receptions for 15 to 20 yards and get you a total of 4 to 5 points. But he does have the ability to also get you 2 receptions for 60 yards and 8 points. So he's going to be in play for me. I'm not going to have both in the same lineup, obviously. But, again, it's not as risky as trying to pay off CJ Pro size at a similar price, for example. So I think those 2 are definitely in play, and I'll probably be slightly over the field.
Look, if you think about this, just think back to any Texans games, even in the past 2 years, basically, this year and last year. Darren Fells has been the guy, and it reflects in his snap count. On this season, let's pull this up. This season, he's averaging 67% of the snaps, and Jordan Akins is 56%. I think people are overreacting to Akins. I think Darren Fells is the number 1 guy on this team, and at 2,600, he can absolutely come out and get a 2-touchdown game. We've seen it happen. He's got 3 touchdowns this year. He's got multiple games over 50 yards receiving. He's got, one game with 7 targets, 6 receptions, 85 yards and a touchdown. So look, to me, Darren Fells, I'm going to prioritize Fells over Akins because 2,600 is a nice price tag. And all you need from him is 40 yards and a touchdown at that price tag. And he most likely could end up in the optimal. Let's move over to the other side, tight ends here. Really the only guy to talk about is TJ Hawkinson. He's at 7,200. He's priced up a little bit here. If you look at his previous fantasy outputs, he's been a little disappointing this year. But he has a relatively high floor. He hasn't really done anything to impress. He's had a couple games at 16 fantasy points. He's got, 1, 2, 3, 4. So he's got 5 touchdowns. That's not terrible for a tight end on a shitty team. But at 7,200, you're going to need a lot more than 40 yards and a touchdown out of him potentially. How are you handling Hawkinson? Do you like Hawkinson this week? I think he might just kind of be forgotten about, especially at that price tag.
The only reason I'm going to like him this week is if he is forgotten about, and I'm forced to play him because of that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, even with 5 touchdowns, you would kind of expect a little bit higher output on some of these fantasy numbers.
Yeah.
He's getting enough targets, and he's getting enough receptions, right? I don't get why he's not turning it into more. And personally, I've been playing him on main Slate DFS for the past couple of weeks.
Me
now,
too. Yeah, me too.
Well, pretty much all season. Because he's moderately priced and he gets in there, but he hasn't been working out well for me.
No, he hasn't.
I really don't plan on getting much of him. Again, my primary pick on this side of for the Detroit Lions is going to be DeAndre Swift, and kind of just building in from there with the different offensive pieces. So I don't know if TJ Hawkinson is going to get there, especially if I'm paying $8,400 for Swift. And given the fact that it's a $1,200 price difference to go from, a guy who's going to, end up with 25 to 30% of the target share on a good day with Galladay and Jones injured, to a guy who's going to get 15 carries, 3 targets, and be on the field for 70% of the snaps.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at with him. And then just to comment on these other 2 guys, I don't think I'll have him in my player pool. Jesse James, maybe.
He's a name. Yeah, he's $200. Maybe you take a shot with one lineup with him, maybe.
Yeah, both of these teams are just they're notorious for just throwing the ball to whoever the fuck's out there. So you could get lucky. And last night I learned my lesson. I was literally talking shit about Jefferson, saying the only reason why I know who he is because, or the only reason I play him is because I think he's the other Jefferson.
Justin Jefferson, yeah, exactly.
And he scores a touchdown.
Of course
and
he
is
did.
in the optimal.
God.
Right. So, that's kind of where I'm at with this. I'm pretty much, if you're a practice squad player, I'll exit out of the player pool. But otherwise, I'm going to be a little bit more open moving forward.
Yeah.
And Jesse James definitely seems like one of those guys who could end up with 1 reception, 12 yards, and a touchdown.
Yeah. And
at $200, that's exactly what you need. Now, again, probably only have 1 lineup with him if I even go that route. So, but that's all I got for the tight ends here. I'm not a big fan of anything on this side of for Detroit, but it's just not. I don't think I don't think Hawkinson can get there.
All right, so let's move over to kickers and defense here. I think defense could be an X, especially on the Detroit side. Houston, we know that Matt Stafford is erratic and sometimes can cause some turnovers. He's not that bad. I don't think he's going to give up 2 pick sixes or fumble multiple times. There's always that option. The Lions are at 2,800 and the Texans are 3,600. I'm more likely to just X both of them out. Maybe I'll get 1 or 2 lineups with the defenses in just in case. But these defenses are not good, and they're not very dynamic. They're not going to cause turnovers. They're going to have to be handed turnovers. And these offenses aren't great, but I don't see them turning over the ball multiple times in this particular game. When it comes to kickers, you've got Kaimi Fairbairn at 4,000 and Matt Prater at 3,800. I always have interest in Matt Prater. Maybe I'm just biased, but this dude can kick the shit out of the ball. We're playing in a dome. There's no wind. I personally am okay with getting a little bit of both of these kickers. They're under they're 4K and under. What are your thoughts on kickers and defense here?
Defense, I don't know if I want any from either side of the ball. The one thing to keep in mind is again, you're dealing with two just really bad teams, so you could get the opportunity for one of the defenses or special teams units to overperform and end up with a touchdown just because the other team is so bad. So that's something to keep in mind. I don't know if you need to axe them both out entirely. I mean, maybe one lineup with each defense in there. Because again, if for the Lions defense to be valuable, you're assuming that Deshaun Watson isn't going off, and if he's not going off, the Texans are not scoring more than 10 points in this game. So that's you make sure you're building a game script around that specific lineup. But I don't think it's a terrible dart throw at 2,800. But I'll keep an eye on line movement. Jesus, if that line starts to go up, then I'll downgrade both these defenses. And if it starts to come closer to the 40s, then maybe I'll upgrade both of these spots. But that's where I'm at for defense. For kickers, sure, both are in. I prefer Prater being 200 cheaper than Fairbairn. And Prater has the ability to put up a 60-yarder. So we've seen that before. I think he has... Both offenses suck. There's a chance that both of these teams, the score is like 18-15. So you might have to have both kickers to be optimal. Yeah. So again, that's a game script build. Make sure you're just keeping that in mind. But I think all are in play, but just moderately, maybe 5-10% of your max total lineups.
So typically, if you watch the show before, I'm not a huge fan of forcing in kickers unless it's a super low total game with really bad offenses. But I think the kickers are actually in play a little bit more today, or for this slate, than they typically would be, simply because there's just not a lot of value out there. And me personally, I just don't know where this game is going to go. And there's a total opportunity for both of these teams to just stall out in the red zone. They just can't get it done. They don't have the weapons around them to actually get in the end zone. So there's an opportunity for both of these field goal kickers to be in the optimal lineup. I'm not going to double kicker it. I'm not going to do that this week, but I will have more exposure to these kickers than I typically would. So just keep an eye on that. All right, so before we move on over to our fade of the night and our captain and our lineup builds and everything like that, just a friendly reminder, throw us a like, please, if you don't mind. It really helps us out. Subscribe. Check out our other 2 Showdown videos as well. Those should be out today. We already have one available now, the Ravens versus Steelers game. We have a 15-minute version, and then we have an hour and 10-minute version. Both very valuable depending on what you need, depending on how much time you have. So help us out. We really appreciate that. Let's move over to our fade of the night and cue the sound.
What's your name? Tony! Fuck you, Tony!
Who are we telling to fuck off here for fade of the night? Ellie, go ahead.
Yeah, Brandon Cooks. I'm just going to end up paying up for Will Fuller, which means I'm going to have to naturally fade Brandon. He absolutely has very high upside. He has that 30-point game earlier in the season, but the rest of them have been kind of middling performances or floor-type performances. I mean, he's absolutely a boomer bust guy, so I'm not going to go 0%, but I'm not going to make him a priority. Again, Will Fuller has just been more consistent this year, and I think he's pretty much the guy. So that's really all I got to say on Brandon Cooks. Honestly, if I'm just being completely transparent, I think you could just pretty much pick a name out of the hat and pretty much have a fairly decent chance at guessing the fate of the night.
Yeah,
this one. So
exactly. These guys all can't eat, especially being at this price tag. When it comes to Kenny Golladay, it's a similar situation. I know Kenny Golladay is super dynamic, and look, if he was fully healthy, I would be all in on him. He'd probably be one of my captain choices. But for me personally, I don't know where he's at injury-wise, and look, to be honest, I don't want to have to worry about waiting until, in LA, it's going to be where I live. It's going to be freaking, 8 a.m. when the shit comes out on Thanksgiving Day. I'm not gonna be up at 7:30 building lineups. I'm going to build these lineups the day before. I'm going to monitor news in the morning, obviously. But look, I'm gonna fade Kenny Golladay because even if he does play, I like Marvin Jones better. And then if he doesn't play, I don't have to worry about like going in there on Thanksgiving morning, sneaking away from family or whatever, and trying to adjust my lineups. That's just I know that's more of a logistical thing, to be honest. And look, if he does play, like I said, Marvin Jones, I love him even more because he's priced down, and I can get Will Fuller, I can get Swift if he plays. So look, Kenny Golladay can absolutely go off. He can break the slate. I'm just gonna go. Look, I'm gonna go into the field on him. Yeah, I'll probably get like if I'm doing 42 lineups like I usually do. I don't know why I always fall on 42 lineups, but that's just where I'm at. If I'm doing that, I'll probably have like two, 3 lineups with him, and then if he's ruled out, I'll just go in and switch him out manually. I don't have to redo any CSV edits. I won't have to go into Excel and fuck around. It'll just be done. So that was a long-winded way of saying Kenny Golladay, not necessarily a huge fan. And if he breaks the slate, it is what it is. I'll just crack open a beer at around 10 a.m. or whatever after he scores 2 touchdowns, and I'll move on to the next one. All right, so let's move on to our favorite segment here. This is our Crown Their Ass. Take it away, Denny.
Now, if you want to crown them, then crown their ass.
Ellie, tell me about your pick.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've beat the dead horse here pretty badly on this one, but DeAndre Swift, I think, is in the best position to kind of capitalize on just the Houston defense being terrible, the inefficiencies on offense that they've been experiencing as far as Detroit goes. And this is an opportunity for Detroit to try and establish some presence in the division. Minnesota just lost, and they're not too far out of stuff, right? They can still potentially claim one of those wild card spots. So how do you do that? How do you get ready for the playoffs? You get your
playoffs. Don't talk about playoffs. You kidding me?
Yeah,
playoffs.
Exactly, man. And look, they're not going to make it. They're for sure not going to make it. But they have young talent, DeAndre Swift, that they need to get involved in the game and try and build some momentum into next year. Adrian Peterson's old. Kerryon Johnson's been inconsistent since he's been in the league. I thought he was going to have a better season than he did last year. But it looks like DeAndre Swift is their guy. His fantasy performances have been fairly consistent when he's above 14 carries. So I like him. I just think he's in a great spot, and at 8,400, it doesn't make sense not to play him in.
If you've been paying attention to the show, my pick is Marvin Jones. I don't think I need to really explain that too much, but at that price tag, it allows you to get a little bit more unique. I don't think he's going to be high owned in the captain. I don't think they're going to have ownership projections out for all these games individually. They will for the night game, but I don't think they will for the morning game and probably the second game on the slate. So to me, I'm going to go out on a limb and guess he's going to be 5% owned in the captain. If Golladay plays, he might be a little bit boosted up if Galladay's out. But, the bottom line is getting a guy at 5% owned at that price, I can spread it around and really, I might concentrate every single one of my lineups with him just so I can, because I don't know, typically speaking, you can really, you can prioritize certain players that you really like. I just don't have a feel in this game. I don't know who's going to go off. They're bad teams. There's a lot of options. I'd rather just focus on, okay, look, I'm going to go all in on Marvin Jones. I'm going to get maybe 80 to 90% of my captain lineups with Marvin Jones, and I'm just going to spread out the flex from there and just hope that Marvin Jones goes off. If he doesn't, like I said, I'm just going to crack open a beer and eat some pumpkin pie. So, all right, let's build a lineup, bro. What do you think?
Let's do it.
Who do you want to throw in a captain here?
I actually like your guy, Marvin Jones. Let's start with him.
All right. Marvin Jones. All right. So do we want to get, we got to get both quarterbacks, right? Or do you want to go, we got to at least get Deshaun Watson. That's obvious. Do we want to do one lineup without Stafford? Let's throw Swift in there instead of Stafford. And then get another wide receiver. Like, how do you want to handle this?
I mean, how are you looking to go 2-4 or 3-3?
I think a 2-4 here, to be honest.
I like Marvin Jones and DeAndre Swift then.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome.
And look,
actually,
with Marvin Jones, potentially, he might be higher owned if Galladay is out, obviously. So if Galladay is in, you could get away with the 3-3. I think his captain ownership will be a lot lower. So let's go with Swift at 8.4K. That leaves us with about 5,700 per position. We got to get 3 more Houston players. So right off the bat, I want to get Darren Fells up in this motherfucker right here. I feel like he's a good option. Akins is going to be overowned. I know his projected for only 3 points or whatever it is right now. Obviously, that's gonna change as we get closer. So that'll scare people off. So where do you want to go? We got 7,300 here. We got to go Texans side, right? We got to go Fuller or Cooks, don't we? Can we get Fuller in here? Yeah, look at that. Fuller, and we got 3,500 left. How do you feel about this so far?
I like it. It's filling out that last spot that's looking a little tough for me.
All right, so we can get Coutier. We can't get a kicker. Let's see. Anybody else popping out to you? Can we? No. I don't want to get Procise in this lineup. Maybe
I don't mind Kiki in this position.
I don't mind it either. You have 3 pass catchers in a lineup with Watson, and then you're hoping that Marvin Jones catches 2 touchdowns and goes off for 120 yards, and Swift can score a touchdown. But all the volume from Detroit needs to come from Jones and Swift, and then Deshaun Watson spreads it around to these other guys. I like this lineup a lot. I really do. It's all based on news, obviously, but I kind of like it, man. What do you think?
Yeah.
Do you want to throw in one with Swift real quick?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So let's look at DeAndre Swift and the captain. How do you want to handle this? If a running back is in the captain for the underdog, we got to assume that this is an even game and possibly a lower scoring game. How do you want to handle this roster construction? What story are you going to tell here?
Honestly, I'm leaning towards that direction. Honestly, I'm looking at DeAndre Swift and then one other player, probably the pass catchers from Detroit, and then I'm going to run it back with a 4 stack on Houston side. So I think we start by jamming in Deshaun Watson, of course.
Yeah.
And I like Will Fuller. I want to see where we can go with him.
We can get Will Fuller in there. That leaves us with 4,300 a pop. So it's getting a little tight here, but we can figure it out. We're going to have to go 2 punts. We're going to have to go 2 value guys here and then throw in 1 more middle range, I think.
So I think I like Kenny Stills.
Yeah, let's mix it up with Kenny Stills instead of Coutier. Okay, so we got 6,000. So we should probably go cheap and then go mid range, don't you think? If we have 12,000 total remaining here.
Yeah. So what about this? What about going? Yeah. So
son of a
Marvin
bitch.
Jones.
Marvin, sorry, I was trying to clear air there. All right, so Marvin Jones, so 4,600. I mean, you thinking 3-3 here, or are you still thinking 2-4?
I'm still thinking 2-4, and it gets interesting. If 4,600, you can obviously go
Marvin
3-3 and throw in Marvin Hall, but
yeah,
I don't think Fairbairn is a bad play.
Oh
here
yeah,
either.
you know what? You're right.
And I mean, even if you wanted to drop down to Prater again at 3,800 and go the 3-3 route, I think this is a decent range to be in.
Yeah.
Just because you're leaving some salary on the board too, so that helps break away some of the total ownership or the ownership expectations by not maxing out the salary. So I think leaving a little bit on the table here is fine given the situation that we're looking at. And if you want to get crazy, man, you can swap Fuller out for Brandon Cooks. Then all of a sudden you can probably get up to, I don't know, fucking Kenny Galladay, or maybe even Matt Stafford. So I think there's a lot of unique builds that you're going to be able to get with some of these captains we've got.
So obviously, disclaimer. I mean, this particular lineup is not a cash lineup. This is a large field lineup. We're trying to get as much leverage as possible. with lower ownership, sticking in guys like Kenny Stills, and this particular build seems like a pretty good large field tournament lineup. So just keep an eye on that. Don't go entering this in your cash lineups or your single entries. So anyways, Ellie, how do you think this game is going to go? First game on Thanksgiving. What's your prediction? And anything to send the viewers out as far as roster construction goes?
Man, I don't even know if I want to take a stab at this, but I can see this game easily being like 31-25. I think the Texans are going to win this. And I think it's going to come down to a last-minute potential game winner by Matt Stafford, who's going to come up short. So that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I totally hear you. And the really interesting thing about this game is I could totally see this game being 14-10. Like, I could totally see that happening. And it's like, all right, who the fuck is scheduling these goddamn games? Like, we've seen it all year with showdown slates. They're not flexing the right games out. I know this is Detroit, so they have to play these games. But come on, man. I can totally see it being 14-10. I also can see it being one of the most entertaining games of the year. Just like bad teams with bad defenses with superstars on offense usually turns out to be pretty entertaining. You usually end up seeing some high-scoring games. I personally, like I said, I think it can be low-scoring, but I'm going to go like 42-38 in favor of the Texans. I know it's crazy, but like, who know? I think it's possible, man. I think it's possible.
I think Deshaun Watson is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and if he wasn't on the Texans, he'd be talked about that way.
This reminds me of like a Fitzmagic Dolphins versus Jaguars, like Thursday night game sort of a thing, where it's just both teams just unload. They have nothing to lose. Fuck it, throw the ball up and go from there. So anyways, guys, we really appreciate it. If you're looking for another quick hitter video here, I'll throw it in the description. But check out any of our other 2 Showdown videos this week, and we appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you later.